I felt Officer Derek Harlan slam me onto the cruiser's hood. The sun-baked metal scorched right through my shirt. The cuffs bit into my wrists as he wrenched my arms higher, sending pain shooting up my shoulders. I kept my face turned toward the chipped paint, breathing slow, refusing to give him the flinch he wanted. I forced the words out anyway, quiet and steady. "My dad's in the FBI." Harlan laughed and drove his weight down harder. "Sure he is." My jaw locked. Harlan had no idea that sentence wasn't a bluff, because the man behind it was already stepping into the lot, and Harlan was writing his own ending in broad daylight. Before I continue, drop a comment where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The afternoon sun beat down on the gas station's cracked asphalt in Riverton, casting harsh shadows beneath the fuel pumps. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, trying to look casual as I stood near the humming ice freezer. My phone had died 20 minutes ago, leaving me with nothing to do but wait for my mom to finish her shift at the diner across town. The familiar knot in my stomach tightened as a patrol cruiser rolled into the lot, tires crunching over scattered gravel. I kept my eyes down, focusing on a discarded receipt that skittered across the ground in the hot breeze. I'd learned long ago that making eye contact with certain officers was like waving a red flag. Officer Derek Harlan emerged from the cruiser with practiced slowness, his boots hitting the pavement with deliberate force. I could feel his gaze rake over me before he'd even fully straightened up. Harlan adjusted his belt with theatrical precision, making sure his badge caught the sunlight. "Well, what do we have here?" His voice carried across the lot, pitched to draw attention. "Been watching you hanging around for quite a while now, son." I kept my voice steady, eyes fixed on the ground. "Just waiting for my ride, sir?" "Waiting, huh?" Harlan closed the distance between us in 3 long strides. He moved like a man who enjoyed making others back away, but I held my ground. Funny thing about waiting, most folks do it inside where there's air conditioning, not lurking around outside like they're casing the place. A small cluster of customers had paused by the pumps, phones already raised. I could see their reflections in the store's windows, an audience gathering for Harlan's performance. "I'm not lurking," I said quietly. "The manager knows me. I'm just waiting for my mom to—" "Oh, the manager knows you." Harlan's voice rose another notch, dripping with mock surprise. "Well, isn't that something? And I suppose next you'll tell me you've got some real important connections, right?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I should stay silent, but the words slipped out anyway. "My dad's in the FBI." The laugh that burst from Harlan's throat was like a gunshot, sharp, explosive, and designed to wound. He doubled over, slapping his knee, making sure every spectator could appreciate the joke. "Did you hear that?" Harlan wheezed, addressing the growing crowd. "His daddy's in the FBI." He straightened up, wiping imaginary tears from his eyes. "Boy, I haven't heard that one in at least a week. Usually it's my uncle's a lawyer or I know the mayor, but FBI, that's premium grade stuff right there." Heat crawled up my neck, not from embarrassment but from the slow-burning anger I fought to contain. I could feel phone cameras recording, capturing my humiliation in high definition. "Turn around," Harlan ordered, humor vanishing from his voice like a switch had been flipped. "Hands behind your back." "For what?" I asked, even though I knew better. Harlan's hand clamped down on my shoulder, spinning me roughly. "Loitering, suspicious behavior. And now we can add interfering with an officer's investigation." The handcuffs bit into my wrists as Harlan ratcheted them deliberately tight. A sharp upward jerk of my arms forced a gasp from my lungs. My phone slipped from my pocket, hitting the pavement with a crack that seemed to echo across the suddenly silent lot. "Oops," Harlan said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Guess you should have had a better grip on that." He maneuvered me toward the cruiser, making sure to parade me past the gathered onlookers. Some looked away, some kept filming, but none intervened. The cruiser's hood was hot enough to feel through my shirt as Harlan pushed me against it. I could smell burnt oil, hot metal, and the artificial pine scent hanging from the rearview mirror. Behind me, I heard the distinct sound of phones recording, their artificial shutters clicking like insects in the summer heat. Harlan leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear. "Everybody's got a story," he whispered, the words slithering like oil. The cruiser's lights flashed once, a deliberate signal that made my skin crawl. Through the windshield's reflection, I watched more phones rise into the air, their lenses glinting like eager eyes in the afternoon sun. A woman at Pump 3 shook her head and hurried her children into their minivan. The gas station attendant stood frozen in the doorway, his name tag catching the light, another witness choosing the safety of silence. The handcuffs dug deeper as I shifted my weight, metal warming against my skin like a brand. Each breath brought the scent of sun-baked asphalt and the leather of Harlan's gear, smells that would stick in my memory long after the bruises faded. In the distance, a truck's air brakes hissed on the highway, a mundane sound that somehow underscored how ordinary this moment was meant to appear. The ice freezer continued its steady hum, the same one that had kept me company while waiting. Now it served as background music to my public humiliation, its rhythm unchanged by the injustice unfolding before it. The afternoon sun remained indifferent overhead, casting the same shadows it always had, while beneath it, power flexed its muscles and truth cowered in the corners, waiting for its moment to emerge. The afternoon sun blazed against the cruiser's white paint, turning the hood into a mirror that threw harsh light back into my eyes. My wrists throbbed where the metal cuffs bit into my skin. Each subtle movement sent fresh sparks of pain up my arms. Sweat trickled down my neck, but I didn't dare move to wipe it away. Harlan's boots scraped against the asphalt as he circled the cruiser with slow, purposeful steps. "Not so chatty now, are we?" he called out, his voice still pitched for his audience. "What happened to all that talk about your FBI connections?" The crowd had grown larger, their phones still raised like electronic torches. Some whispered to each other, but none stepped forward. The gas station's automatic doors wheezed open and closed as customers hurried past, pretending not to see. Harlan's hand landed heavily on my shoulder. "Time for a ride, smart guy." He reached for the rear door, and that's when I saw it. 2 quick taps on the cruiser's hood, sharp and deliberate like a secret handshake. The sound of another engine growling into the lot drew my attention. A second patrol car pulled up fast, tires chirping on the hot pavement. Officer Travis Collins emerged, his movements fluid and practiced. I watched through squinted eyes as Collins approached his own cruiser first, 2 taps on the hood identical to Harlan's before he started walking toward us. "What have we got?" Collins called out, but his tone wasn't questioning. It was expectant, like an actor hitting his mark. "Got ourselves an uncooperative subject," Harlan announced, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "Been resisting since the start." His fingers found the handcuffs again, twisting until the metal dug deeper into my wrists. I couldn't hold back a sharp intake of breath. The pain was immediate and precise, calculated rather than casual. In the same moment, Collins shifted his position, using his body to block the view from several phone cameras. The movement was smooth, almost choreographed, like he'd done it 100 times before. "You're hurting me," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "Oh, now he wants to play nice," Harlan laughed, but the sound had an edge to it. "Should have thought about that before you started causing trouble." The crowd's unease was palpable now. A woman in a business suit took a half-step forward, then stopped as both officers' heads snapped in her direction. She retreated to her car, keys jingling nervously in her hand. "Saw him acting suspicious?" Harlan continued his narration, each word clear and projected. When questioned, subject became confrontational, refused to comply with simple commands. Collins nodded along, positioning himself to create what I realized was a perfect blind spot between the crowd and Harlan's hands. "These kids today," he added, shaking his head for the audience. "No respect for authority." The realization hit me like ice water. This wasn't random. The double taps, the positioning, the rehearsed lines, it was all too smooth, too practiced. I'd seen school plays with more spontaneity. This was choreography, right down to the way Collins's stance guided the crowd to gather where their videos would catch the least damaging angles. A bead of sweat rolled into my eye, but I blinked it away, forcing myself to stay still. The cruiser's hood had grown hot enough to feel through my clothes, but I didn't dare move. Every twitch seemed to give them another line for their script. "Think maybe a night in lockup might adjust that attitude," Harlan said, his voice carrying just the right note of authority and concern. It was perfect for the videos being taken, perfect for whatever report he'd write later. Collins moved again, subtly hurting the crowd back with his presence. "Might need to run his information," he added. "See if there's any other outstanding issues we should know about." The words sounded casual, but I caught the undertone, a threat wrapped in procedure. The gas station's air conditioning unit kicked on with a mechanical groan, adding its white noise to the scene. A semi-truck rumbled past on the highway, its shadow briefly cutting across the lot like a curtain between acts. The crowd shifted uneasily, but their phones stayed up, recording exactly what they were meant to see. I drew shallow breaths, fighting to keep my face neutral. My shoulders ached from the awkward position, but I knew better than to adjust them. Every grimace, every flinch would become part of their performance, more evidence of the uncooperative subject they were creating. "Running out of patience here," Harlan announced, his hand heavy on my back. The pressure increased just enough to make my muscles tense, another calculated move designed to make me look resistant to anyone watching. The crowd had grown larger, but remained carefully distant, held back by invisible lines of power and fear. A teenager about my age started to raise his hand, maybe to object, but his mother quickly pulled him back. The message was clear. This was not a moment for heroes. The sun continued its relentless glare, reflecting off the cruiser's hood and the badges on the officers' chests. Each flash of light seemed to emphasize their authority, their control over the narrative unfolding in this ordinary gas station parking lot on an ordinary afternoon in Riverton. I remained still against the cruiser, feeling the heat seep through my shirt. My breath came in measured pulls, careful not to give them any excuse for escalation. Around me, the audience they'd gathered watched in uncomfortable silence, their phones capturing exactly the story Harlan and Collins wanted to tell. A vehicle's engine roared into the lot, different from the lazy rumble of customer cars or the practiced purr of police cruisers. A black SUV cut through the afternoon heat, tires gripping pavement as it stopped with precision. The crowd parted instinctively, phones swiveling to catch this new development. Agent Michael Hayes emerged from the driver's side before the engine fully died. His movements were fluid, but contained. His eyes found me immediately, taking in the scene with the kind of focus that stripped away everything unnecessary. The badge on his hip stayed covered, his suit jacket unbuttoned, but not revealing any federal authority yet. "Get off him!" The words came out level, each syllable carved from steel. Michael didn't raise his voice or speed his stride. He didn't have to. Harlan's hand tightened briefly on my shoulder, but something changed in his posture. The theatrical confidence flickered, replaced by something harder to read. His eyes narrowed as he studied Michael's approach, and recognition dawned across his features like a shadow. Wade Harlan. Michael spoke the name without introduction or explanation. The effect was immediate. Harlan's practiced smile slipped, revealing something uncertain underneath. The crowd noticed. Their phones dipped slightly as they sensed the shift in power. Recovering quickly, Harlan forced out a laugh that sounded hollow against the ambient noise of traffic and humming gas pumps. "This is a police matter," he said, but the authority in his voice had developed a crack. His hand stayed on me, fingers pressing into my shoulder like an anchor. "Remove your hand." Michael continued his approach, each step measured and deliberate. His voice remained steady, but something in his eyes made several onlookers take unconscious steps backward. Now Collins shifted his weight, hand drifting toward his radio. The movement drew Michael's attention for a fraction of a second, enough to let him catalog the threat without breaking stride. "Sir," Harlan tried again, stretching out the word like he was testing its weight. "I don't know who you think." Michael's jacket moved aside just enough to reveal the badge now. Federal credentials caught the afternoon sun, unmistakable in their authority. A murmur ran through the crowd. More phones rose, sensing the story had just gotten bigger. The radio on Collins' shoulder crackled to life almost immediately. He stepped back, speaking low and fast into it. The response came quickly. Multiple voices, multiple units. The backup Harlan had summoned was already moving. "Your subject," Michael said, closing the final distance, "is my 17-year-old son." His tone hadn't changed, but something in it made Harlan's fingers twitch against my shoulder. "And you've had your hands on him long enough?" I remained still, my breathing carefully controlled. I'd never seen this version of my dad before, this precise fusion of authority and restraint. Michael's presence seemed to have changed the air pressure in the parking lot. A second police cruiser turned into the lot, lights off but moving with purpose. Then a third. The crowd's phones swung between the arriving vehicles and the confrontation by the first cruiser, trying to capture everything at once. We received reports, Harlan started, but Michael cut him off, of a teenager waiting for his mother's shift to end. Michael's words landed like weights. You saw him standing here, and you made a choice. He stepped closer inside, what would normally be Harlan's comfort zone. The same choice you've been making for years, more radios chirped. The new arrivals were positioning their vehicles in a loose circle, creating a perimeter that felt more threatening than protective. The crowd found itself slowly pushed back, contained by the expanding law enforcement presence. Harlan's laugh was gone now, replaced by something harder. His hand finally left my shoulder, but he didn't step back. You don't have jurisdiction here, he said, voice low enough that only Michael and I could hear clearly. That's where you're wrong. Michael's reply was equally quiet. His eyes never left Harlan's face. I have exactly as much jurisdiction as I need. The air felt charged now, like the moment before a storm breaks. The crowd had grown silent, phones still raised but barely breathing. Even the passing traffic seemed muted, as if the highway itself was holding its breath. Those cuffs, Michael continued, each word precise, are coming off now. Harlan's jaw tightened. The theatrical authority from earlier had burned away, revealing something colder underneath. His hand moved toward the cuffs, but slowly, like each inch was a concession he resented making. The metal clinked as the cuffs loosened. I straightened carefully, rolling my shoulders to ease the strain. Red marks stood out on my wrists where the restraints had been too tight for too long. Michael's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened as he saw the marks. You're done, he said quietly. The words carried more weight than their volume suggested. Harlan's response came just as soft, but edged with something that wasn't quite a threat. Not here. The cruiser's rear door swung open with a heavy click. Michael pulled out his credentials fully now, holding them where everyone could see. Special Agent Michael Hayes, FBI. His voice carried across the lot without shouting. This situation is now under federal jurisdiction. Harlan's expression tightened, but he didn't back away. More cruisers had arrived, forming a loose circle around the scene. The red and blue lights painted everything in alternating colors, making the gas station look like a crime scene. Federal jurisdiction. A new voice cut through the tension. Sergeant Paul Ramsey approached from one of the recently arrived vehicles. His walk was unhurried and deliberate. He wore authority like a comfortable suit, projecting calm authority that made Michael's federal credentials seem almost irrelevant. This is a local police matter, Ramsey continued, positioning himself between Michael and the cruiser where I sat. A simple case of loitering and resisting arrest. His tone was reasonable, almost friendly, but his eyes were cold. There was no resistance, Michael said, keeping his voice level, and no probable cause for the initial contact. Ramsey smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Agent Hayes, your presence here is creating a public safety issue. He gestured at the crowd, still filming everything. These officers are trying to do their jobs. Their jobs? Michael's hand tightened on his credentials. Officer Harlan targeted my son without cause, used excessive force. Transfer units here, Collins announced loudly, cutting through Michael's words. A white transport van had pulled into the lot, its official markings stark against the deepening afternoon light. Ramsey nodded as if this had been the plan all along. We'll need to move the subject to central booking. The subject is my 17-year-old son. Michael's voice carried an edge now, and he's not going anywhere. But Harlan was already moving, yanking open the cruiser door. He grabbed my arm, pulling me out roughly. I tried to get my feet under me, but the momentum was too fast, too harsh. Watch your step, Collins said, his tone mock helpful. When I stumbled, Collins's hand shot out, shoving me sideways. My shoulder slammed into the cruiser's doorframe with enough force to drive the air from my lungs. The impact echoed across the parking lot. Stop resisting! Harlan's voice rose theatrically, loud enough for everyone's phones to catch. Stop fighting. I wasn't fighting. I could barely breathe. But the officers moved with practiced coordination, creating a narrative through motion and voice that had nothing to do with reality. Michael surged forward, every muscle tensed, but Ramsey's arm shot out, blocking his path with casual precision. Stand back, Agent Hayes. The title sounded like an insult in his mouth. Don't interfere with official police business. The crowd had grown larger, but people were stepping back now, faces showing a mixture of horror and helpless anger. Phones still recorded, but the weapons on the officers' hips sent a clear message about intervention. Harlan and Collins marched me toward the transport van, their grips tight enough to leave marks. Each time I tried to get my feet properly under me, they would change pace or direction, keeping me off balance. "This is assault," Michael said, his voice carrying across the lot. "Every second of this is being recorded." "Is it?" Ramsey's smile hadn't wavered. "Funny thing about recordings, they can be so unreliable. Corrupted files, accidentally deleted footage." He shrugged. "Technology, you know." The transport van's rear doors stood open like a mouth. I tried to turn my head to look back at my dad, but Collins's hand gripped my neck, forcing me to face forward. "He needs medical attention," Michael said, watching me struggle to breathe normally after the impact. That doorframe hit. "Our medical staff will assess him at central booking," Ramsey cut in smoothly. "Standard procedure." The officers lifted me into the van with more force than necessary. The metal floor rang hollow under my knees. Before I could straighten up, the doors slammed shut with practiced efficiency. I watched through the small window as Michael memorized everything. Harlan's satisfied smirk, Collins's casual brutality, the way other officers moved to block camera angles without being told. The practiced choreography of power unchecked. The transport van's engine rumbled to life. Ramsey stepped closer to Michael, his voice dropping to a conversational level that wouldn't carry to the phone still recording. "This town doesn't answer to your badge," he said, each word precise and measured. "The sooner you understand that, the easier things will be." His eyes were flat like a shark's. Michael stood absolutely still, his face a mask of control. But his eyes moved deliberately from face to face, committing each one to memory. Harlan's contemptuous grin, Collins's predatory focus, Ramsey's bureaucratic coldness, the other officers' studied indifference. The transport van pulled away, its white bulk catching the red and blue lights as it turned onto the street. The crowd began to disperse, lowering their phones, sharing looks of shocked disbelief. Some people started writing down badge numbers, while others just shook their heads and hurried to their cars. The sun hadn't set yet, but the lengthening shadows seemed to darken the gas station lot. The police cruisers remained in their loose circle, their lights still flashing, creating a barrier between Michael and the direction the transport van had taken. Ramsey stood at its center, his posture relaxed but his eyes watchful, like a man who knew exactly how much power he wielded and exactly how to use it. The fluorescent lights in the Riverton County holding facility cast a sickly glow over everything, making even the white walls look jaundiced. The buzz from overhead was constant, drilling into my skull as I stood at the intake desk, my wrists raw from the tight cuffs. Denise Thompson sat behind the protective glass, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her computer screen. She hadn't looked directly at me once since they brought me in. Her eyes fixed firmly on her monitor as her fingers moved across the keyboard. "Confirming details," she said, her voice flat and professional. "Previous residence at 1247 Maple Avenue in Oak Park." I frowned. That was my old address from years ago before the adoption. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone here. "School record shows enrollment at Oak Park Elementary, 4th through 6th grade." Denise continued reading, still not meeting my eyes. "No nickname read." Her voice caught slightly on the last detail. My stomach clenched. Nobody had called me that since I was 10. It was a name my biological father had used before everything changed, before Michael. "How do you know all that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't tell anyone here about—" The intake officer behind me yanked the cuffs sharply, making me gasp. "Keep still," the officer ordered, though I hadn't moved. Denise's fingers paused over the keyboard for just a moment. Her shoulders tensed, but she kept reading. "Medical history indicates childhood asthma resolved by age 12. Allergy to penicillin." "Those are sealed records," I said. The cuffs bit deeper into my wrists. "You shouldn't have access to—" I said keep still. The intake officer snapped, giving the cuffs another warning twist. Denise's eyes flickered up for just a split second, meeting my gaze before darting away. There was something there. Fear, maybe, or guilt. She quickly returned to her screen, continuing to recite details from my past that she shouldn't know. As they led me down the holding corridor, other detainees watched through the reinforced windows of their cells. One man, middle-aged with graying temples, caught my attention. The man's lips moved silently, forming clear words. "Don't ask questions." I felt cold despite the stuffiness of the hallway. The man's expression wasn't threatening. It was warning, almost protective. They placed me in a small interview room with a thick glass partition. The fluorescent light buzzed louder here, making my head pound. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Michael appeared on the other side of the glass. My father looked composed, but I could read the tension in his jaw, the careful way he held himself. Michael's eyes immediately went to the marks on my wrists, the bruising already visible where the cuffs had been. "Are you okay?" Michael asked, his voice slightly distorted through the intercom. I nodded, then glanced at the guard standing by the door. "They knew things," I said quietly. "The booking clerk had information about me. Old information." Michael's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "What kind of information?" "My old address in Oak Park, the elementary school. They even knew about—" I swallowed hard. "They knew the nickname my real dad used to call me." "My real dad? I mean, before—" Michael's hand tightened on the edge of the counter in front of the glass. He noticed the intake paperwork clipped to the wall behind me, his eyes scanning the visible portions. Understanding dawned on his face, followed quickly by a carefully controlled anger. "This wasn't random," Michael said, his voice low enough that the guard would have trouble hearing. "They had a file on you before tonight, before you ever set foot near that gas station." I felt the truth of it settle into my bones. "Why? What did I do?" "Nothing," Michael said firmly. "You didn't do anything. This is about—" He glanced at the guard, choosing his words carefully. "This is about something else, something that was already in motion." The guard shifted, checking his watch. "Time's up." "Dad?" My voice cracked slightly. The enormity of what was happening started to sink in. This wasn't just a bad night, a power-tripping cop. This was something bigger, something that had been waiting for me. "I see it," Michael mouthed silently as the guard moved to take my arm. "I see everything." They led me back through the corridors, past more cells with more watching eyes. The buzzing lights seemed louder now, more intrusive. Or maybe it was just the blood pounding in my ears as I tried to process what was happening. The cell they put me in was small, with a narrow bunk bolted to the wall and a stainless steel toilet sink combination in the corner. The door locked behind me with a heavy click that seemed to echo through my chest. I sat on the edge of the bunk, my mind racing. The booking clerk's fear, the other detainee's warning, my father's controlled anger when he saw the intake sheet. All of it pointed to something deliberate, something planned. The fluorescent light in my cell buzzed and flickered, casting jumping shadows on the concrete walls. Somewhere down the corridor, someone was crying. Someone else was shouting demands that went unanswered. My wrists throbbed where the cuffs had been, a physical reminder that nothing about this night had been accidental. Not the stop at the gas station, not the excessive force, not even the random patrol car that just happened to spot me. They had been waiting for me, and somehow my father had known immediately when he saw that intake sheet. This wasn't the start of something. This was the continuation of something that had begun long ago, something that had been dormant, but never really gone. And now it was awake again, reaching for me with institutional hands and bureaucratic paperwork that shouldn't exist. The holding corridor stretched long and empty, its mint green walls making the fluorescent light seem even harsher. I sat on the hard wooden bench, rubbing my wrists where the cuffs had left angry red marks. 2 guards stood nearby, not looking at me directly, but watching my every move. When footsteps echoed down the corridor, a man in a rumpled gray suit appeared, clutching a worn leather briefcase. He had thinning brown hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. His tie was slightly crooked, as if he'd been tugging at it nervously. "Tyler Hayes." The man's voice was soft, almost apologetic. "I'm Alan Whitaker, your public defender." He attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I nodded, studying the lawyer's face. There was something off about his demeanor, too careful, too controlled. Whitaker sat beside me on the bench, keeping enough distance to seem professional, but close enough to speak quietly. He opened his briefcase with trembling fingers, pulling out some paperwork. "I've reviewed your case," Whitaker said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Given the circumstances, I think we should discuss plea options, before things get—" He paused, swallowing hard. "Before things get complicated." Complicated? I asked, matching the lawyer's quiet tone. Whitaker's eyes darted to the security camera mounted in the corner, its red light blinking steadily. The system here, it works a certain way. Some officers don't take kindly to troublemakers. Jail placement can be difficult for young men who challenge authority. The words came out smoothly, practiced, like lines from a script Whitaker had delivered many times before. But there was an undertone of something else, urgency maybe, or fear. The charges, I started, they don't make sense. I was just standing. Whitaker flinched. It was subtle, just a slight tightening around his eyes, but I caught it. The lawyer's hands fumbled with the papers, nearly dropping them. Heavy footsteps approached from behind. Officer Collins walked past us slowly, deliberately. His hand reached out, dragging his knuckles across the metal bars of the holding cells. The sound echoed through the corridor. Scrape, clang, scrape, clang. A methodical reminder of where we were, of who held power here. Whitaker's shoulders hunched slightly, his breathing becoming shallow. He shuffled through his papers faster, hands shaking more noticeably now. "There's a standard deal on the table," Whitaker continued, voice even quieter. "Disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, 6 months probation, community service. It's very reasonable considering..." "Considering what?" I pressed. Whitaker wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he stared at the papers in front of him, though I could tell he wasn't really reading them. "Sometimes the best legal strategy is to minimize damage, to find the quickest path through the system." The scraping sound of Collins's knuckles grew louder as he made another pass. This time he paused briefly behind us before continuing his patrol. "But I didn't do anything wrong," I insisted, though I kept my voice low. "My dad, he's FBI. He saw what happened." Whitaker's hand jerked, leaving a crooked pen mark across one of the forms. "Please," he whispered, still not looking up. "Let's focus on practical solutions." I watched as the lawyer's fingers traced nervous patterns on the edge of his briefcase. The man's wedding ring caught the fluorescent light, and I noticed how the knuckles were white from gripping the papers too tightly. "Mr. Whitaker," I said carefully, "are you okay?" The question seemed to startle the lawyer. He finally looked at me directly, and for a moment, his professional mask slipped behind his glasses. His eyes were wide with an emotion I recognized all too well, the same fear I'd seen in the booking clerk's face, in the other detainees' warnings. "I'm here to help you," Whitaker said, but the words sounded hollow. "To guide you through the process, the system, it works best when we work with it, not against it." The security camera in the corner whirred as it rotated slightly. Whitaker's eyes flicked toward it again, then back to his papers. "Think about the plea," he urged, gathering his files with trembling hands. "Think about your future, about getting through this safely." The word safely hung in the air between us. It wasn't a legal term, it was a warning. Collins made one final pass, this time stopping completely. He stood at the end of the corridor, watching us with cold eyes and a slight smile. His presence seemed to fill the space, making the hallway feel smaller, more confining. Whitaker stood up quickly, shoving papers back into his briefcase. Some of them were crooked, others slightly crumpled, but he didn't seem to notice or care. His tie was even more askew now, and a thin sheen of sweat had appeared on his forehead. "I'll need your decision by morning," he said, backing away. "Before the arraignment, before..." He glanced at Collins, then back to me. "Before options become limited." As Whitaker turned to leave, his shoulder brushed against the wall. He straightened his jacket with shaking hands and took a few steps down the corridor. Then he paused, his back to me, and whispered without turning around, "Please don't make them angry." The words were barely audible, but they carried the weight of experience, of knowledge, of surrender. I watched Whitaker hurry away, his footsteps quick and uneven on the concrete floor. The lawyer's fear wasn't for me. It was personal, deep-rooted, earned through years of watching what happened to those who challenged the system. The rules here weren't written in any law book. They were enforced by the scrape of knuckles on bars, by cameras that never stopped watching, by the quiet desperation in a public defender's voice. They were enforced by fear. I later learned that my dad sat in his black SUV in the station parking lot, the blue glow of his laptop screen illuminating his face. His fingers moved methodically across the keyboard, each click punctuated by a growing tension in his jaw. The intake sheet from my booking lay on the passenger seat, wrinkled from being gripped too tightly. Michael's eyes moved between it and his screen, connecting dots that formed an ugly picture. Riverton Towing, he muttered, typing the name into his database. 27 police-ordered tows in the past month, all from traffic stops by the same rotating group of officers, all processed through the same dispatch channel. He pulled up another window, the Riverton County Medical Center. The pattern repeated. Every injury report from police encounters, whether resistance claims or booking documentation, bore the signature of the same physician. No variations, no questions asked. Michael's screen filled with bail records. Judge Helen Crowley's name appeared with mechanical consistency. 3,000 for disorderly conduct, 5,000 for resisting arrest. The amounts never varied regardless of circumstances or prior record. It was like watching a preset program run its course. He clicked through dispatch logs next. Dispatcher Ruth Calder's name caught his attention. Her shift patterns aligned perfectly with the highest concentration of targeted stops. Response times for backup were impossibly quick, as if units were already positioned, waiting for calls that hadn't come in yet. Inside the station, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I was marched down a corridor I hadn't seen before. The officer behind me pushed too hard, making me stumble. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Officer Collins appeared from a side door, face tight with anticipation. "Special housing," he said, the words dripping with false concern, "for your protection." "I don't need protection," I said, planting my feet. Collins's hand shot out, grabbing my collar and slamming me against the concrete wall. The impact knocked the air from my lungs, but something deeper than training kicked in, muscle memory from years of martial arts that Michael had insisted on. I twisted, breaking the hold with a practiced motion, my elbow driving back instinctively. I caught Collins in the solar plexus, earning a satisfying grunt of surprise. The victory lasted less than a second. The baton came fast, catching me across the ribs with a sickening crack. I folded, gasping, but there was no time to process the pain. 2 more officers materialized, their movements coordinated like a well-rehearsed dance. One swept my legs, while the other drove a knee into my back, grinding my face into the floor. Michael's head snapped up at the sound of a commotion inside. Through the station window, he could see security cameras smoothly pivoting away from the corridor where the noise originated, not broken or disabled, deliberately redirected. The motion was too precise, too practiced. His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up more records. Property seizures cycled through the same auction house. Court-appointed attorneys came from the same short list. Evidence processing followed predictable paths through predictable hands. Every piece fit together with mechanical precision. This wasn't random corruption where greed created occasional opportunities. This was systematic, optimized, a machine built to process people into profit, running on fear and sealed with bureaucratic efficiency. The sound of dragging feet made Michael look up again. Through the window, he could see me being hauled past, one leg not quite taking my weight. My face was pressed toward the floor, but Michael caught a glimpse of blood on my lip, a darkening mark on my cheekbone. The officers moved with practiced efficiency, their grip precise, their pace measured. They weren't angry or out of control. This was routine, standard procedure, applied with clinical detachment. Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. His breath came out in a controlled hiss as the pieces aligned in his mind. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper, but carried the weight of terrible certainty. "This isn't corruption," he said, each word precise and cold. "This is an operation." Inside his laptop, another window blinked. Judge Crowley's signature appeared on a new document, a transfer order dated tomorrow, already stamped and logged. The system was moving faster than normal procedures allowed, processing paperwork that shouldn't exist yet. Michael's screen filled with more connections. Property liens filed before arrests, seizure orders prepared in advance, medical forms with timestamps that didn't match incident reports. Every piece of documentation was perfect, every procedure followed to the letter. But the timing was wrong, the sequence was inverted. Through the window, I disappeared around a corner, the sound of my uneven steps fading. The cameras remained pointed away, their red recording lights blinking steadily. No alarms had sounded, no supervisors had responded. The machine hummed along, processing its latest input exactly as designed. Michael's fingers moved across the keyboard again, pulling up personnel files. Each name connected to others in patterns too precise to be accidental. Shifts aligned. Reports mirrored each other. Response times created perfect symmetry. It was beautiful in its way, a masterpiece of institutional efficiency turned toward systematic abuse. The parking lot remained quiet, empty except for Michael's SUV and the scattered pools of lamplight. Inside the station, paperwork was already being processed, reports filed, boxes checked. By morning, everything would be documented perfectly, legally unassailable. The machine would move on to its next target, leaving no fingerprints, only perfectly filed forms and properly logged procedures. The interview room's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Michael's face as he sat across from me. The metal table between us felt like a gulf. I held myself carefully, one arm wrapped protectively around my ribs, my breath coming in controlled, shallow pulls that couldn't quite hide the pain. Michael's eyes cataloged every mark on my face. The split lip, the darkening bruise along my cheekbone, the scrape across my temple where they'd ground me into the concrete. His hands tightened into fists under the table, but his voice remained steady. "I should have told you this years ago," Michael said. "But I hoped, keeping you in the dark would keep you safe." I didn't respond. I'd gone still in that way Michael recognized, the focused quiet that meant I was absorbing every detail. 17 years ago, I was working a federal case here, Michael continued. Civil rights violations, systematic abuse of power, evidence tampering. We'd built it carefully over 2 years. Your biological father was one of our key witnesses. The fluorescent light flickered once, casting strange shadows across the institutional green walls. Through the window in the door, officers moved past with practiced efficiency, their radios crackling with coded transmissions. His name was Marcus Hayes, Michael said softly. He worked dispatch here for 8 years, started documenting patterns, which officers responded to which calls, how evidence disappeared, where seized property ended up. He built us a map of their whole operation. My fingers twitched against the table. What happened to him? Car accident, Michael's voice went flat. Single vehicle late at night, no witnesses. The brake lines were clean. Too clean, like they'd been replaced after the fact, but we couldn't prove it. A sound echoed from the corridor, the sharp impact of a body hitting metal, followed by raised voices. Someone shouted, "Stop resisting!" The words carried the same rehearsed quality I'd heard earlier. The case collapsed, Michael continued. Key evidence vanished. Witnesses recanted or disappeared. Marcus's notes were gone except for copies he'd hidden with someone he trusted. Your mother, my breath caught. My eyes lifted to meet Michael's, sharp with sudden understanding. She contacted me after the accident, Michael said. She was terrified, not just for herself, but for you. You were barely a year old. She knew too much, had seen too many patterns. She needed to disappear completely. Through the window, we could see another detainee being dragged past, feet scraping the floor. The officers moved with mechanical precision, their motions practiced and smooth. I arranged new identities, Michael said. Got her settled across the country, but you... He paused, his voice roughening. You were too young. The system wasn't safe. They had too many eyes in foster care. So I adopted you myself, changed your name, buried the connection so deep even our own databases wouldn't find it. My hands had gone still on the table. My face showed no expression, but Michael could see me processing, reevaluating every memory through this new lens. The case wasn't dead, Michael continued, just dormant. I've spent 17 years gathering new evidence, building a stronger foundation. I thought we had more time. He shook his head. I underestimated how quickly they'd move once they recognized you. The lights flickered again. Down the hall, someone was shouting, the raw sound of real fear, not performance. A baton struck flesh with a dull thud. The station's routine violence continued its steady rhythm. That's why the intake had my old information, I said quietly. They already had a file on me from before. Michael nodded. They never stopped watching, waiting for any trace of Marcus's evidence to surface. When you showed up here, they thought I was part of it, I finished. That's why everything moved so fast, why the paperwork was ready before they even arrested me. Another crash from outside made the window rattle. Multiple voices rose in coordinated shouts, following their practice script. I didn't flinch. My face had gone distant, analytical, recalibrating my entire understanding of who I was. "I should have told you sooner," Michael said. "Should have prepared you better. But I thought keeping you ignorant would keep you safe. I was wrong. They were never going to let this go." I absorbed this in silence. My fingers traced an idle pattern on the table's metal surface, my movements precise despite the pain in my ribs. When I finally spoke, my voice was very quiet. One simple question that carried the weight of 17 years. "Did they know it was me?" Michael's hesitation lasted less than a second, but it was long enough. I nodded once, absorbing this final piece of the puzzle. The answer had been in the pause. The processing area's industrial lighting cast everything in sickly yellow. Two officers flanked me as they led me down the corridor, their boots echoing against the polished concrete floor, my ribs still aching from earlier, each breath a careful negotiation. Through a mesh-reinforced window, I caught glimpses of other holding cells. Most detainees avoided eye contact, but one older man watched me intently. As we passed his cell, the man pressed close to the bars. "Watch yourself, kid," he whispered, voice barely audible. "Harlan's got a system." The guard on my left shoved me forward, but not before the man added, "He always knows what he's going to find before he finds it." They pushed me into a hard plastic chair beside a processing desk. The clerk typed mechanically, not looking up. Around us, the routine of the station continued. Phones ringing, radios crackling, the steady percussion of security doors. "I've seen it dozens of times," the older detainee called out as we passed his cell again. "Traffic stop turns into possession. Possession turns into intent to distribute. Next thing you know, your car's getting seized." "Shut it, Matthews." A guard slammed his baton against the bars. The older man stepped back but kept his eyes on me. "Property goes to auction," Matthews continued more quietly. "Cash goes to evidence. Evidence disappears. Round and round it goes." I absorbed this, connecting pieces, the towing company, the identical bail amounts, the careful choreography of each arrest. It wasn't just violence, it was revenue. Power built on a foundation of selective enforcement and strategic fear. The processing area hummed with fluorescent efficiency. Officers moved with practiced coordination, their actions smooth from repetition. Every step felt scripted, like scenes from a play they'd performed countless times before. A man in plain clothes appeared at the end of the corridor. Unlike the uniformed officers, he moved with casual confidence, nodding to guards who stepped aside without question. As I was escorted past, the man deliberately blocked our path. He smiled at me like we were old friends meeting by chance. His eyes were cold despite the warmth in his voice. "Well, look who it is." The guards tensed, but didn't intervene. They knew their role in this performance. The man leaned closer, still smiling. "You were never supposed to come back here." Before I could respond, the man turned and disappeared through a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The lock clicked with quiet finality. Officer Collins materialized behind us, his presence changing the energy in the corridor. The other guards stepped back, ceding control. Collins's hand landed heavily on my shoulder. "Having trouble following directions?" Collins's voice carried just enough volume to establish context for whatever came next. I kept my face neutral, recognizing the setup. This wasn't random. This was choreographed, another scene in their ongoing production. The shove came exactly as expected, calculated to provoke rather than simply hurt. I stumbled, but caught myself, careful not to make any motion that could be interpreted as resistance. "I asked you a question." Collins moved closer, invading my space. His body language was pure theater, performing aggression for the cameras while watching intently for any reaction he could use. My silence only made Collins push harder. Another shove, more aggressive this time. "You deaf now too?" Everything about the encounter felt designed. The positioning, the escalating pressure, the careful construction of justification. Collins wasn't acting on impulse. He was following a script. The third shove sent me into the edge of a metal desk. Pain flared across my already bruised ribs. Pure reflex made me raise my hands, not to fight, just to brace myself. That was all Collins needed. "Stop resisting!" The shout was immediate, practiced. Alarms began to blare right on cue. What followed was brutally efficient. Collins drove his knee into the back of my leg, collapsing me to the floor. Other officers swarmed in, their movements coordinated and precise. Someone wrenched my arms behind my back, while another officer delivered calculated strikes to my torso. The violence wasn't chaotic. It was controlled, methodical, a message being sent in a language of pain and powerlessness. Each blow targeted areas that would hurt without leaving obvious marks, the product of long experience. My head bounced off the floor as someone ground a knee into my back. The taste of copper filled my mouth. Through the ringing in my ears, I could hear Collins narrating for the report they would write later. Subject became combative, refused verbal commands, actively resisted. The floor was cold against my cheek. Blood from my split lip made small crimson circles on the polished concrete. As my vision blurred, a terrible clarity settled over me. This wasn't just punishment. This was reminder and warning wrapped together, institutional memory being forcibly shared. To them, I wasn't just some teenager who had talked back. I was a loose end from 17 years ago, a walking reminder of unfinished business. Every strike carried the weight of old scores, old fears, old determination to keep buried things buried. The beating continued with mechanical precision, each officer knowing exactly how far to go without crossing lines that couldn't be explained away. This was their art, violence that lived in the margins between official reports and ugly truth. Blood continued to drip onto the floor, each drop a punctuation mark in their ongoing story. I stayed conscious, kept my eyes open, memorized faces and movements and patterns. Even as pain clouded my thoughts, I understood what they were trying to teach me. In this town, the past wasn't really past. It was alive and angry and determined to maintain its secrets. Morning light spilled across the police station parking lot, now transformed into an impromptu media circus. News vans lined the curb, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal flowers. Reporters clutched microphones and coffee cups, jockeying for the best camera angles. Inside, Michael watched the growing crowd through reinforced windows. The viral video from the gas station played on a nearby break room TV, muted but impossible to ignore. My arrest looped endlessly. Harlan's theatrical aggression, the unnecessary force, the clear abuse of power, all captured in high definition by multiple phones. This is unacceptable behavior, Mayor Emily Wilson declared from the podium hastily erected outside. Her voice carried through the building's walls. We take these allegations very seriously. A small but vocal group of protesters had gathered behind the press line, their signs demanding justice and accountability. Some carried enlarged screenshots from the video, Harlan's face circled in red. Their chants echoed across the parking lot. No more brutality. No more silence. Michael observed the performance with growing unease. The machinery of damage control was moving too smoothly, like a well-oiled machine. Press releases appeared within hours. Official statements rolled out right on schedule. The department's response felt rehearsed rather than reactive. 2 officers led me from my holding cell to a newer section of the facility. The new room had actual windows and a real bed instead of a metal shelf. Even the lights seemed softer here. "Water," one of the officers offered, suddenly solicitous. "Maybe something to eat." I sat carefully on the bed, ribs still aching from Collins's lesson the night before. I didn't respond to the offer, but my eyes tracked every movement, every detail. Down in the lobby, Police Chief Evans addressed another cluster of reporters. "Officer Harlan has been placed on administrative leave, pending a full internal review." His tone projected grave concern. This department holds itself to the highest standards. Collins passed through the corridor outside my new cell, but kept his eyes straight ahead, his previous swagger notably absent. Other officers gave the area a wide berth, suddenly busy elsewhere. Michael noticed what was missing beneath all this theatrical contrition: no investigators pulling files, no evidence bags being filled, no urgent meetings behind closed doors. The kind of panic that should accompany genuine exposure was conspicuously absent. Through his FBI contacts, Michael monitored the official channels. No warrants were being prepared, no subpoenas issued, no real investigation taking shape behind the public display of concern. Inside a wood-paneled conference room, Sergeant Ramsey sat at the head of a long table surrounded by administrative staff. His smile never wavered as he signed form after form, transfer orders, temporary duty assignments, carefully worded press statements. "Make sure these go out in the right order," he instructed, passing folders to his secretary. "Timing matters." The phone on his desk rang constantly, each time he answered with the same practiced tone of administrative diligence. "Yes, we're addressing the situation. No, we can't comment on ongoing personnel matters. The department is fully cooperating." Michael was granted a brief visit with me. We sat across from each other in a consultation room, voices low despite the illusion of privacy. "They're moving me to county," I reported. "Better conditions," they said. Michael nodded slowly. "They're putting on quite a show." "The protests seem to be working," I observed, but my tone carried the same doubt Michael felt. Through the window, we could see more news vans arriving. The crowd of protesters had doubled. Social media was erupting with outrage. Local officials scrambled to position themselves on the right side of public opinion. "It's too clean," Michael said quietly, studying my face. "Too organized." I understood. The system wasn't breaking under pressure. It was adapting, shifting shape, preparing to absorb and redirect the blow like a martial artist, using an opponent's momentum against them. Across town, phones rang in judges' chambers, lawyers' offices, and newsrooms. Each call carried a piece of the counterattack being assembled. Each conversation laid groundwork for what would come next. In the station's records room, clerks methodically processed paperwork with practiced efficiency. Nothing was rushed. Nothing betrayed panic. The machine wasn't stalling. It was recalibrating. Outside my new cell, officers changed shifts with normal precision. Radios crackled with routine traffic stops and minor complaints. The department maintained its rhythm like a heart continuing to beat despite external trauma. Mayor Wilson was on TV again announcing the formation of a citizens' review board. Chief Evans detailed new training initiatives and policy reviews. The performance of reform continued without pause. But beneath the surface, in quiet offices and secure phone lines, the system was doing what it had always done, protecting itself. Each press conference, each official statement, each small concession was part of a larger pattern, a defensive strategy refined through years of practice. Michael watched another news van park outside. More protesters arrived with fresh signs. The crowd's energy felt righteous, optimistic, certain of victory. They couldn't see what he saw, the careful orchestration of apparent accountability, the deliberate pressure release valves, the machinery of containment operating exactly as designed. The sunlight through the window cast harsh shadows across the consultation room. Father and son sat in silence for a moment, both understanding that this wasn't the beginning of justice. It was the prelude to something else entirely. The police station lobby buzzed with activity as the late morning sun streamed through the glass doors. Reporters huddled in clusters, cameras and microphones at the ready. The air felt electric, charged with anticipation and underlying tension. Agent Michael Hayes walked through the entrance with measured steps. His dark suit was a stark contrast to the chaos around him. Camera flashes erupted as journalists recognized him, but he moved past without acknowledging their shouted questions. His face remained impassive, but his eyes scanned the room with practiced precision, noting positions, exits, threats. At the front desk, Officer Martinez straightened up, her hand instinctively moving toward her radio. Michael placed a thick manila envelope on the counter, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "Federal civil rights warrants," he announced, voice carrying across the now quieting lobby. "And Department of Justice release orders for Tyler Hayes, all properly executed and time-stamped." Martinez's eyes widened as she flipped through the documents. Their official seals and signatures carried the full weight of federal authority. She reached for her phone, fingers trembling slightly. Sergeant Ramsey emerged from his office, reading the room's shift in energy. His usual smooth demeanor showed the first hints of strain as he approached the desk. He took the papers from Martinez, scanning them with increasingly narrow eyes. "These will need to be properly processed," Ramsey said, attempting his usual administrative delay. "There are procedures." "The procedures are complete," Michael cut him off. "Those orders are effective immediately." Ramsey's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the side, a subtle motion that wouldn't have been noticeable to most observers, but Michael caught it just as he caught the slight nod Ramsey gave. Officer Collins appeared from a side corridor, flanked by two other officers. They positioned themselves between Michael and the hallway leading to the holding cells. Their stance was casual, but their intent was clear: a human barrier. "Sir, this area is restricted," Collins said, squaring his shoulders. "You'll need to wait in the public area." Michael didn't move. His hand went to his belt where a radio was clipped. The motion drew every officer's attention, but instead of reaching for a weapon, he simply pressed the transmit button once. A single click echoed through the lobby. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The main doors burst open as FBI agents poured into the building. More agents appeared from side entrances, their movements coordinated and precise. Their tactical vests clearly marked FBI in bold letters, their weapons held low but ready. "Federal agents!" The lead agent's voice boomed through the space. "Stand down and clear the area." The lobby erupted into chaos. Reporters scrambled backward, cameras still rolling. Civilians pressed against walls or fled toward exits. Officers froze in confusion, caught between training and survival instinct. One young officer, Jenkins, according to his nameplate, made the mistake of shoving the nearest federal agent. The response was textbook law enforcement training, but executed with Special Forces precision. The agent stepped into the push, using Jenkins's own momentum to flip him over a desk. The furniture crashed to the floor as Jenkins landed hard, the wind knocked from his lungs. Collins, never one to back down, swung a wild punch at the agent approaching him. The agent ducked under the strike and caught Collins's arm, using his own forward motion to slam him into the wall. The crack of bone-meeting concrete was followed by Collins's howl of pain as his arm snapped. Another officer reached for his holster. Before his fingers could touch the grip, two agents took him down. His face met the floor with enough force to split his lip, hands quickly secured behind his back. The entire confrontation lasted less than 30 seconds. When it ended, the federal agents had complete control of the lobby. Several local officers lay subdued on the ground. Others stood with their hands raised, finally understanding the new reality. Michael walked through the aftermath like a ship parting waves. Agents moved in practiced formation around him, securing each corridor as they advanced. The sound of federal teams clearing the building echoed through the halls, sharp commands, doors being opened, radios crackling with status updates. They reached the holding area where two officers tried to block access to the cells. One look at the agents' faces, still flushed with adrenaline from the lobby takedown, was enough to make them step aside. Michael approached my cell, keyring in hand. The metallic sound of the lock turning seemed to cut through all other noise. "Tyler," Michael said, his voice steady and final, "you're coming with me." The cell door swung open with a decisive clang that echoed through the corridor. Behind us, agents continued securing the building, their boots heavy on the polished floor. The department's illusion of control had been shattered, replaced by the undeniable reality of federal authority. In the lobby, reporters pressed against the windows, cameras recording every moment. The morning light caught the FBI badges and tactical gear, making them shine like beacons of accountability. The system's careful choreography of fake reform had been replaced by genuine forceful intervention. The afternoon sun beat down on the police station steps as the glass doors swung open. I emerged, flanked by federal agents in tactical gear. Their formation wasn't rushed or protective. It was procedural, almost ceremonial in its deliberate pace. Each step declared federal authority without saying a word. Michael kept his right hand firmly on my shoulder, official release papers visible in his left. The documents caught the sunlight, federal seals gleaming. His face remained composed, but his grip on my shoulder tightened slightly when cameras started flashing. "Keep walking," Michael said quietly. "Nice and steady." The crowd of reporters and onlookers parted as we descended the steps. Cell phones recorded everything: the agent's positioning, Michael's unwavering stance, my bruised but unbowed posture. This wasn't a rescue being caught on film. It was accountability being documented. Behind us, the station doors burst open again. Officer Collins emerged on a stretcher, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle. His face was red with rage and pain as paramedics tried to secure him. "This is assault," Collins screamed, trying to sit up despite the restraints. "These feds attacked us. They..." A paramedic pushed him back down, cutting off his rant. Through the glass doors, more scenes unfolded. Agents in FBI windbreakers moved with purpose, collecting evidence boxes filled with body cameras, computer hard drives, and stacks of files. Other agents led officers to separate rooms for questioning, their hands zip-tied behind their backs. The department's carefully maintained image of control crumbled with each new federal action. Sergeant Ramsey appeared next, walking stiffly between two agents. His usual smooth demeanor had vanished, replaced by barely contained fury as an agent recited charges. "Paul Ramsey, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law." "This is a local matter," Ramsey spat. "You have no jurisdiction here." "Federal civil rights violations create jurisdiction," the agent replied calmly, continuing to read rights as they guided him toward a waiting vehicle. More FBI vehicles arrived, blocking the parking lot exits. Teams of agents carried out computers and boxes of files. Others photographed offices and evidence rooms. The systematic dismantling of the department's power structure continued with mechanical efficiency. I watched it all as Michael guided me toward a black SUV with federal plates. My expression remained carefully neutral, but my eyes tracked every movement, every face, every detail of the department's collapse. "This is what accountability looks like," Michael said softly. "Real accountability, not their version." A reporter pushed forward, microphone extended. "Tyler, how do you feel about—" Two agents smoothly intercepted, creating a buffer zone without touching anyone. Their presence alone was enough to make the reporter step back. Michael opened the SUV's door but paused before helping me in. His voice took on a formal tone, making sure the nearby cameras caught every word. "You're being placed in temporary federal protective custody," he explained clearly. "A federal judge has already scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning. We have witness protection protocols in place, and you'll have full legal representation present." I nodded, understanding the performance was as important as the protection. Every word was being recorded, every action documented. This wasn't just about getting me out, it was about establishing an unbreakable record of federal intervention. Through the station's windows, more scenes played out. Officers sat handcuffed to their own desks while agents went through their computers. Others were escorted to interrogation rooms, the same rooms where they had pressured countless victims. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Dispatch Supervisor Ruth Calder was led out next, her face ashen as agents carried boxes of radio logs and dispatch records. Her carefully maintained system of selective response times and coordinated cover-ups was being pulled apart, call by call. "The logs show patterns," Michael explained to me, still loud enough for nearby cameras to catch. "Response times, unit assignments, selective enforcement, it's all there in their own records." More stretchers emerged from the building, officers who had resisted the federal entry. Unlike Collins, these were quietly efficient exits. No screaming, no protests, just the consequences of poor decisions finally catching up. The crowd's murmuring died down as I stepped into the SUV. The silence felt heavy with realization. This wasn't a temporary disruption or a performative gesture. This was federal power executing its full authority, dismantling a corrupt system piece by documented piece. Inside the vehicle, the sounds became muffled. I could still see the station through tinted windows, agents moving in and out, evidence being loaded into trucks, officers being processed. The building that had loomed so large in my fear now looked small and vulnerable under federal scrutiny. Michael closed his door and settled into the seat beside me. Through the windshield, we watched another FBI vehicle pull up, more agents emerging with search warrants in hand. I looked back at the station one final time, taking in the scene of its systematic deconstruction. The flag above the entrance fluttered weakly in the afternoon breeze, while below it, federal agents continued their methodical work. "That door doesn't close on us anymore," Michael said simply. The SUV's engine hummed to life. Through the windows, I could see more federal vehicles arriving, more agents emerging. The dismantling of the department's power would continue long after we left. The system that had thought itself untouchable was being taken apart, one warranted seizure at a time. The federal courthouse stood imposing and silent, its marble halls empty of the usual press chaos. 2 U.S. Marshals guarded the courtroom doors, their faces stern and professional. Inside, afternoon light filtered through high windows, casting long shadows across the polished wood. I sat straight-backed beside Michael in the front row, my bruises still visible, but my posture unwavering. Across the aisle, legal representatives from the police department shifted uncomfortably in their seats. No Harlan, no Collins, no Ramsey, just suits trying to defend a crumbling system. Judge Marcus Warner entered, his robes crisp and his expression focused. The room rose and settled quickly. Unlike the theatrical performance in local court, this proceeding moved with precise efficiency. Michael approached the podium, his steps measured and confident. Files and evidence boxes sat organized on the table behind him. He didn't need theatrics or emotional appeals. He had facts. "Your Honor," Michael began, his voice steady and clear. "The facts of this case are straightforward. We have documented evidence of an unlawful stop, excessive force, and clear retaliation against my son, Tyler Hayes. But this incident is not isolated. It represents a pattern of behavior deeply embedded in the department's operations." Michael lifted the first document, the original gas station surveillance footage, now enhanced and time-stamped. The initial stop was conducted without probable cause or reasonable suspicion. Officer Harlan approached with clear intent to escalate, as evidenced by his body language and immediate aggressive stance. The footage played silently on the courtroom screens. The defense counsel shifted uncomfortably as Harlan's theatrical performance became clear in the enhanced video. "Note the deliberate positioning to block civilian cameras," Michael continued. "This is trained behavior, Your Honor, not improvisation." He moved to the next exhibit, dispatch logs seized that morning. These unaltered records show a pattern. Specific officers were routinely dispatched to certain locations targeting specific demographics. Response times were manipulated. Calls were selectively routed. This wasn't random. It was policy. The defense attorney stood. "Your Honor, these matters are currently under internal review." Judge Warner's gavel cracked once. "Counsel, internal review does not supersede federal jurisdiction, especially in matters of civil rights violations. Continue, Agent Hayes." Michael nodded and presented surveillance footage from inside the station. The excessive force continued after arrest. Multiple officers participated in what can only be described as coordinated assault. The footage showed my treatment in custody, the accidental impacts, the deliberate provocations, the synchronized responses when I reacted. The defense attorneys stared at their notepads. "Officers Harlan and Collins have extensive histories of similar incidents," Michael continued, lifting another file. "Complaints were systematically buried, witnesses were pressured, evidence disappeared, until now." He presented the next piece, internal messaging logs recovered from department servers. These communications show clear coordination between officers, dispatch, and supervision to maintain this system of abuse. The pattern extends beyond individual officers to the department's operational structure. Judge Warner leaned forward, studying the documents carefully. His expression hardened as he read. "I call Tyler Hayes to testify," Michael said, stepping back. I approached the stand, my movements controlled and deliberate. I was sworn in, my voice clear and unwavering as I said, "I do." "Please describe the events of your arrest," Michael prompted. I spoke with measured precision, never embellishing, never deviating into emotion. I detailed the stop, the escalation, the coordinated arrival of backup, and the systematic abuse that followed. My testimony matched the evidence exactly. "They knew who I was before they stopped me," I concluded. "They had a file ready. This wasn't random enforcement. This was activation of an existing plan." The defense attorney rose again, adjusting his tie nervously. "Your Honor, while we acknowledge some procedural irregularities, these matters should be handled through standard departmental review processes. Officer Harlan has already been placed on administrative leave." "Administrative leave is not accountability," Judge Warner cut in sharply, "and these irregularities constitute a clear pattern of civil rights violations under color of law. Federal jurisdiction is not only appropriate but required." He turned to Michael. "Agent Hayes, do you have any additional evidence to present?" "Yes, Your Honor." Michael lifted another file. We've recovered evidence of a parallel reporting system, unofficial records of stops, arrests, and enforcement actions maintained outside official channels. These documents directly tied departmental leadership to the pattern of abuse. The defense table erupted in whispered conferences. One attorney started frantically writing notes. Judge Warner studied the new documents, his expression growing darker. "I've seen enough," he said finally. "This court finds clear evidence of systematic civil rights violations requiring immediate federal intervention." He looked directly at me. "All charges against Tyler Hayes are dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm issuing no-contact orders against all officers involved in this incident." The defense attorneys started to rise. Judge Warner's gavel cracked again. "I'm not finished," he continued. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm authorizing immediate arrests of all officers named in these documents pending federal indictment. Agent Hayes, coordinate with the U.S. Marshal's Office for execution of these warrants." He turned to the defense table. "This court will not tolerate systematic abuse of authority. Your clients are not above the law. They are bound to uphold it. Their betrayal of that duty demands consequences." Judge Warner lifted his gavel. "This hearing is concluded." The sound echoed through the courtroom like a final punctuation mark. I released a slow, controlled breath. Beside me, Michael quietly closed the case file, its contents now part of an unalterable federal record. The defense attorneys gathered their papers quickly, already pulling out phones to warn their clients, but it was too late. Outside, federal agents were already moving. I remained seated as the courtroom cleared, watching the afternoon light shift across the seal of justice on the wall. Michael's hand found my shoulder, steady and grounding. The system that had thought itself untouchable was about to learn otherwise, not through chaos or confrontation, but through the methodical application of law, the very thing they had sworn to uphold and then betrayed. The federal building hummed with quiet efficiency as afternoon light slanted through vertical blinds. Michael's office was sparse but purposeful, a desk, 2 chairs, and walls lined with filing cabinets. No decorations, just the tools of justice. I sat across from my father, my posture still carrying the weight of the morning's court hearing. The bruises on my face had begun to fade to yellowed shadows, but the questions behind my eyes remained sharp and clear. Michael pulled out a thick file, its edges worn from years of handling. The label was simple: Case number 47889. He placed it between us on the desk, letting the weight of its history settle. "It's time you knew everything," Michael said, his voice steady. He opened the file, revealing photographs, reports, and transcripts carefully preserved. "Your biological father, Marcus Hayes, was a mechanic, good at his job, respected in the community. He noticed something wrong during a routine repair." Michael pulled out a series of photographs showing damaged vehicles. These cars had been seized through civil forfeiture. Official reports claimed they were involved in drug trafficking. But Marcus spotted inconsistencies, damage that didn't match the reports, VIN numbers that didn't align with documentation. I leaned forward, studying the images. My fingers traced the edge of a photograph showing a familiar police cruiser in the background, Harlan's car. "Yes," Michael nodded. Marcus started keeping records, quiet at first, just notes about which officers brought in which vehicles. Patterns emerged. Harlan was at the center of it all. He'd falsify probable cause, conduct illegal searches, then seize vehicles that could be resold through specific dealers. Michael spread out more documents, bank records, transaction logs, maintenance sheets. The money disappeared into a network of shell companies. Some went to officers directly. Some funded other operations. All of it was stolen from innocent people who couldn't fight back. "My father tried to stop it," I said softly. It wasn't a question. He gathered evidence for months, kept everything organized, documented every detail. Then one night, Harlan pulled him over. Michael's voice remained controlled, but his hands tightened on the file. The official report claimed Marcus was combative, resisted arrest, had a medical emergency during transport, died en route to the hospital. My breath caught, but I didn't look away. What really happened? Michael pulled out the newly unsealed medical examiner's report. Blunt force trauma, systematic, deliberate. They made it look like an accident, but the evidence was clear if anyone had bothered to look. He paused. I was assigned to investigate 6 months later. By then, the trail was cold. Witnesses had been silenced. Evidence had vanished, but Marcus's documentation survived. Where? He mailed it to a federal evidence lockbox the day before he died. Smart man. Your father knew the system well enough to preserve the truth. Michael's voice carried quiet respect. When I found it, I also found his family file, found you. I absorbed this, my hands steady despite the weight of revelation. You adopted me to protect me. Yes, but also because I made a promise to the truth your father died for. I couldn't finish the case then. The department was too insulated, too powerful, but I could keep you safe until the right moment. Michael met my eyes directly. When Harlan saw your name on that ID at the gas station, he recognized it from the old case files. Not you personally, just the ghost of unfinished business. That's why they had my old information ready, I said. They'd been waiting for anything connected to that case to resurface. They thought they were springing a trap, Michael confirmed. Instead, they walked right into one. Every action they took against you proved the pattern Marcus documented years ago. Same tactics, same cover-ups, same players. Only this time, we were ready. Michael pulled out one final document, a fresh autopsy report with today's date. As of this morning, your father's death has been officially ruled a homicide. Harlan's badge number is listed as a person of interest. The statute of limitations on murder never expires. I stared at the report for a long moment. When I spoke, my voice was quiet but firm. They thought they buried him. They tried, Michael agreed, but truth doesn't stay buried. It waits. Your father knew that. Everything he documented, every detail he preserved. It was all building toward this moment. He made sure the evidence would survive even if he didn't. The office fell silent, except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights. Outside, federal agents moved with purpose, preparing warrants and coordinating arrests. The machinery of justice, slow but inexorable, was finally engaging. I traced my finger over my father's name on the report. Marcus Hayes, a mechanic who saw wrong and refused to look away. A father who protected his son with truth when he could no longer do it in person. So he didn't lose, I said finally, my voice steady and clear. Michael looked at me, this young man who carried his biological father's courage and his adopted father's determination, who faced down the same corrupt system and refused to break. No, Michael answered simply. He lasted. The word hung in the air between us, transforming from defeat into victory. Marcus Hayes hadn't merely survived, he had endured long enough to plant the seeds of justice, and now, years later, those seeds had finally broken through concrete. Outside the office, phones rang and printers hummed as federal warrants were processed. The system that had thought itself untouchable was about to learn the power of patient truth. Early evening painted the gas station in familiar hues of orange and purple, the sun settling into its descent. The fluorescent lights buzzed to life, casting their artificial glow over empty parking spaces where days ago chaos had erupted. Now, silence reigned. I stood near the ice freezer, the same spot where everything had changed. This time, my phone wasn't dead. It rested securely in my pocket, fully charged. No cruisers circled the lot, no radios crackled with coded threats. The security cameras still watched, but their gaze held no power over me anymore. I ran my fingers along the metal frame of the freezer, feeling its cold solidity. The concrete under my feet was the same, but I wasn't. My bruises had faded to memory, but the strength they'd given me remained. Michael stood beside me, dressed in civilian clothes rather than his FBI suit. He'd parked our car in the exact spot where Harlan's cruiser had been, a small act of reclamation that spoke volumes. Feels different, I said, my voice carrying none of the tension it had held that first afternoon. That's because it is different, Michael replied. He gestured toward the station's office where a new clerk worked the register. No suspicious glances, no hurried calls to dispatch. The old system's been dismantled. Judge Crowley resigned this morning. Ramsey's looking at federal charges, even the towing companies under new management. I nodded, watching a family fill up their minivan at Pump 3. The mother smiled at me casually, just another teenager at a gas station. Nothing more, no whispered warnings, no averted gazes. The file they had on me, I said. It's gone, expunged completely. Your record's clean and the surveillance flags have been removed from your name. Michael placed a hand on my shoulder. But your father's file, the real one, that's become part of the official record. Marcus Hayes' case is marked solved now, not closed. A truck pulled in, its engine rumbling. I didn't flinch. I watched its reflection in the station's windows, remembering how I used to track every vehicle, anticipating trouble. That hyper-vigilance had kept me alive, but I didn't need it anymore. The new chief called this morning, Michael continued. They're implementing reforms, real ones with federal oversight. Body cameras that can't be turned off, independent review boards, transparent forfeiture procedures. He paused. Your father's death wasn't in vain. The system he tried to fix is finally changing. I walked to the spot where Harlan had cuffed me. The cracked pieces of my old phone had long since been swept away, but I could still picture them scattered across the pavement. That broken phone had seemed like a symbol of powerlessness then. Now it represented something else, the shattering of an old order. Mom says the convenience store up by her work is hiring, I said, changing the subject with purpose. Regular after-school hours, normal teenager stuff. Michael smiled, understanding the significance. I wasn't just moving on, I was reclaiming ordinary life. Sounds good, though I imagine your college applications might be looking a bit different now. Yeah, I glanced at the station's door. Been thinking about law school or maybe civil rights work. There are other towns out there like this one. A police car drove past on the main road, one of the new officers following proper protocols. Its presence caused no stir, no fear, just another vehicle making its rounds. Inside the station, the clerk restocked the coffee station. The security cameras recorded mundane transactions. The ice freezer hummed its steady rhythm. Everything looked exactly the same as it had that first afternoon. But the machinery behind it all had been transformed. Your father would be proud, Michael said quietly. Both of what you endured and how you handled it. Standing your ground without losing yourself. That's a rare kind of strength. I picked up a pebble from the parking lot and rolled it between my fingers. I used to think justice was just about winning fights. Now I get it. It's about lasting long enough for the truth to matter. A gentle breeze stirred the American flag hanging limply above the station. Behind the building, crickets began their evening chorus. The day was winding down, peaceful and ordinary. We should head home, Michael suggested. Your mom's making that pasta you like. I nodded, taking one last look at the scene. The ice freezer stood silent sentinel. The security cameras blinked their red lights rhythmically. The gas pumps displayed their prices in steady LED numbers. Everything was normal, and that normality itself was a victory. I walked to our car, my steps unhurried. No one watched me go. No radio called in my movement. No system tracked my departure. The truth had stripped away the lies, leaving behind only what was real and right. Michael opened the driver's side door, but paused before getting in. You okay? Yeah, I said and meant it. I'm good. The sun dipped lower, painting the station in deepening shadows. But unlike before, these shadows held no threats, no hidden dangers. They were just shadows, nothing more. I got into the passenger seat, closing the door with a solid thunk. Through the windshield, I watched the station grow smaller in the gathering dusk. The truth of what had happened there would stay, etched into official records and living memory. But the fear was gone. As we pulled away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Justice stood behind me, solid as stone, ensuring that what had been made right would stay right. The evening settled around us, quiet and clear, as we headed home. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day. I stood there at the gas station in Riverton as the evening light softened everything around me, and it hit me all over again. This wasn't just my story, it was a lesson I needed to carry for the rest of my life, and I hope it stays with you too. No matter how powerful the system feels, no matter how many badges flash or how deep the fear cuts, the truth never stays buried. My biological father, Marcus, lost everything because he refused to look away from the corruption around him. He documented every lie, every stolen life, knowing it might cost him his own. He didn't fight with fists or shouts. He fought with quiet courage, hiding the evidence so it could outlive him. 17 years later, that same truth reached out and saved me when the same men came for me. I felt every bruise, every twisted cuff, every moment they tried to break my spirit, but I also felt my dad Michael's steady hand on my shoulder, the man who chose to become my father, because he made a promise to a dead friend's son. That kind of love, that kind of loyalty, showed me family isn't just blood. It's the vow to protect someone long after the world has forgotten them. The real power isn't in winning every battle. It's in lasting long enough for the truth to rise. When I thought everything was over, when the fear felt like it would swallow me whole, I learned that justice doesn't always come fast or loud. It comes steady, patient, and unstoppable when good people refuse to stay silent. If you're facing something that feels too big, too unfair, too impossible right now, please hear this. Your story matters. Your courage to stand, even when your voice shakes, plants seeds that will bloom when you least expect it. You are stronger than the system that tries to crush you. If this story moved you the way it still moves me, tell me in the comments. What lesson are you taking with you today, or where in the world are you watching from? And if these real-life tales of courage and comeback touch your heart, hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Your support keeps these stories alive and gives voice to every kid, every parent, every person who's still fighting in the shadows. Thank you for being here. I'm truly grateful. See you in the next one.